Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Doug, the retirement guy, with all your monthly ETFs. Well, we got one here for you. Patreon supporter one-on-one call update. Can we retire at 60 with $475,000? So today we're going to answer all that. Basically give you the background, the setup of all this is we had a client, a husband and wife. We did a one-on-one phone call with them. Ended up going to a Zoom call so we could explain things properly. And they were very, very concerned. They have $475,000 in their bank, basically in their retirement fund. They do have a paid-for home. They did have a paid-for car, so they were actually better off than what they thought. And they're cruising right around that 60. They've been watching the channel now for a little over a year, and they just said, we got to know, can we retire at 60? Can we put it together? So we're going to go through the whole process today and show you how the phone call went, what we did, explained everything to you. So grab your favorite mug, fill it with your favorite beverage, and get ready to sit back and find out, did we make the right call? Did we not make the right call? Did we approve it, not approve it? Well, let's get into today's information. Hey, before we go any farther, we got to do that important disclosure. This presentation is for educational purposes only and not for financial, legal, or tax advice. Past performances do not guarantee future results. I am not a financial advisor. I am just a entertainer. So can a married couple retire at 60 with $475,000? That was the question that was thrown basically to us. And they've watched the videos on the 3 bucket system, and they said, we're not structured that way. We've just been putting money away and using a financial advisor to invest our money. And he's been all about growth, growth, growth. And we listened to your channel, and we're coming to the point saying, before we hit 62 for Social Security, can we actually start enjoying life? Can we start moving on? So we're going to break everything down. Some teasers ahead of time. They have about a $3,500 monthly gap that they have to cover, about $42,000 a year, and that's all before Social Security. So we're going to lay out the whole structure that I gave to them so they could really understand the whole package. Hey, before we go any farther, retirement made easy, living on dividends. You want to support the channel? And you know what? Patreon's a great way to do it. So if you ever want to do a one-on-one phone call, you can always join us on Patreon to do that. If not, here's the greatest way to do this. Support us. Coffee mug. 11-ounce or a 15-ounce coffee mug. It's easy to order. Use the QR code or the links down below. You can definitely get yourself a nice morning cup of joe and use a company that keeps you going and helps support a great channel. So the couple and the financial gap. So we first sat down and talked to them, and I asked them core questions and different pieces to it. And we found out, they have $475,000 in their investment for retirement. They have $3,500 in what we call the monthly income gap before Social Security. So basically for them, because they have no other income, they need about $3,500 a month to live comfortably. So they need about $42,000 a year. Now, remember, I said they didn't have a car payment, they didn't have a house payment, but you're still going to have insurance and taxes and all that kind of stuff onto it. So they've really, I give her credit. She did a ton of the work, had everything laid out long before we got to it. So we knew the numbers were solid. So the core question was, can we retire now without damaging the portfolio before Social Security begins? So why the income gap changes the entire math. If you take the $42,000 that they need and you divide that by the $475,000 of money that they have, and you can do this yourself at home, it equals out to about an 8.84% annual cash flow requirement. And that is against the whole portfolio. This is where their financial advisor said, no way, hold tight, you can't do it, you're not in the right position, you need the weight. And when you hit that 8%, see, a financial advisor will only tell you if this number's not 4% or lower, they're going to tell you no, consistently. It's just the way they're built, the way their machine works. I look at this and say 8%, you have potential. But you got to work around this. You got to really work hard. So the old conventional rule of 4%, which is 4% of your nest egg you can retire on, and that's what you live on. The required cash flow here at 8.84 is double that. So this is where the warning signs come from, is can they do it? And this is why they called me and said, hey, look, at our financial advisor is saying absolutely no. You keep coming back with videos saying we could. So we started talking about it. But the portfolio must act as a bridge for retirement today to Social Security later, potentially longer if its claiming is delayed. So we want to make sure we had to go down that path about Social Security, what they want to do. And I also asked them straight out, I says, why do you want to retire now? He basically told me, he says that the company was going to be offering early retirement. He was actually going to qualify for the early retirement. And that's where he's starting to figure out, can he retire early or not? I said, are you getting any income from early retirement? And his answer was, well, we're giving the health care. I said, well, that's huge. He says they're going to give us health care until we're 65. And then they were just going to give him basically a simple, probably about a $10,000 bonus, he said, so nothing major. He goes, I thought the health care would be a great piece to grab. He goes, because I secure my future. So the next one is the Social Security and the bridge concept. So with them, eligibility is not the same as optimal claiming strategy. They're at 60 years old now. The portfolio bridges the gap between that and 62, which is the early retirement for regular benefits. If they wait till 67, they would get the full return. So claiming at 62, I wanted to make sure they understood this, and it can reduce your benefits up to 30%. So they're losing 30%. And it's funny when your own words hit you back in your face. They come back and they say, well, we watched your video on Social Security and you said 62 is the magic number to retire because it takes 11 to 12 years to catch up to the difference between 62 and 67. And I had to chuckle and laugh because she's 100% right. She was 100% right with that. And it's nice to know that someone actually watched the video and seen it and has remembered it and using it accordingly. So I analyzed each spouse separately and considered the survivor benefits, and delaying may change the lifetime income. And we started talking about that, and I said, you know what, maybe one gets it at 62 and the other one waits until 67. But we used the answer of let's use 62 at this point to move forward. So the 3-bucket system, I introduced this to them. They've seen a couple videos that we have done onto it, so they were familiar with it. But I'm going to say right off the bat, something different for them that they were a little surprised at. What the 3-bucket system does, it gives every dollar a job and what it's supposed to do. We're supposed to have protection for today. We need to pay for today, and we need to build for tomorrow. So the percentages that I put into this, and this is the thing that they caught them off guard, is I said the percentages that we're putting in is different for everybody. There is no uniform set package. Now I'll start with one that I like, which is normally a 10, 15, and 75 program. But you can adjust this as you go. So I started off with them with 8% foundation fund. Now that is designed because he's getting that $10,000 of early retirement money. And if you take that $10,000, put it into this, I said, you now have 12 months to live off of. You have 12 months that you don't even have to worry about a single thing in the stock market. You don't have to worry about a distribution. You don't have to worry about anything. I call this your sleep at night money. So you can sleep well at night because you don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to forcibly sell anything in bad markets. You're dialed in, you're golden for 12 months. So they like that part of it. So it was 8%. Then I went to 12% in growth. Now this number, I know a lot of people will say, that's way too low, that's small. It is because of them. They have the position that they need to work to cover that bridge. I told them, I says, this is only a short period of time. This is probably only 2 years. Once we get past 2 years, we're going to start pouring more money into the growth to get your bucket bigger and to produce more growth long term. So 12% in is $57,000. This is for your future and inflation defense. It's built for long-term appreciation. And I know they need more, but the income side of it, which is I always personally put the maximum number at 80%. You're maxing out the fund at $380,000 into the fund, which is going to pay for the retirement basically for the next 2 years, hopefully. And then once Social Security kicks in, this can be reduced down. It can rebalance into the growth fund and make things work. So that's the only difference I have in their program right now and their buckets is I think growth is a little too small and income is too big. So we'll have to balance those out once we get Social Security paying in. So let's break down each one. I sat down with them. I said, look, at foundation bucket, $38,000. What you really want is liquidity. Okay, you want to be able to go in and grab money almost instantly. Okay, you want to design this that if you want to think of it as like your checking account, that you can walk in, or a savings account, you can walk in, grab the money within 24 hours, almost. You can wire it directly from the account if you need to. I want to see that. But what I also told them, I says, we need to make sure we got cash working for us. You can't just sit there and say, hey, I'm going to get a 2%, 1% savings account and get money, which we can, and it's okay, but I want something a little bit bigger. And that's why we went to the SGOV. And they were familiar with this one. It's a very short-term U.S. Treasury. It's like 0 to 3 months Treasury ETFs. Pays a nice distribution, nice, I think about 5%. So your money's not just sitting there, your money's actually generating something. But you got security around it that either one of these could be sold off or cashed out. And we split it 50-50 so they were comfortable. They were happy about this one. She was very happy about this. She knew that she would have money to sit there that she could pull out if she needs to. As I said, it's sleep well at night money. This bucket is the financial shock absorber. It's not a growth engine. It's not an investment. It's basically that shock absorber that takes up the rough parts of the road and makes everything smooth. Okay, so they understood their foundation bucket. They were happy with it. They said, we probably won't make many changes to this. Maybe it'd be nice to have 1 year into it. But I think that 38 was actually very good for them. And I told them, I said, when that 10 grand comes in, if you make the decision, you can add some to this, bump it up to the 42, and then you have 1 solid year, and everything else can go into the growth bucket. That's down the road for them. The foundation bucket is really the stress test that I told them. This is what we're going to do. What happens if the markets fall after retirement starts? Well, just at 38,000, they have with that $3,500 gap, you have about 10, almost 11 months to pay for all your living expenses. And never yet touch the income bucket, never touch your growth bucket, never touch a single thing. So I showed him, I said, if you retire at 60, 6 months later, stock market takes a 25% drop. The bills still need to be paid. You have the money to pay the bills as the stock market, as the markets across the board recover. Okay? The risk call out, an 8% foundation bucket is lean for 2 people at 60 years old, a retiree. The volatility and sensitivity of household stress tests, normally I like to see 12, 18 to 24 months is required in a portfolio. So I always try to tell people this is if you're below 12, you need to put more money into this. And going back to, we're just using what they had today to verify it. But he said, I got 10 grand coming, I can increase this. Now the growth bucket. This is for future. 12% of that $475,000 was put into this for $57,000. Now I told him, this is basically I at this point split it equally between QQQM and VUG. I said we can always go in the S&P 500 if we want to as well. I just think across the board, these two just make the most sense for them. Now, I know you guys can leave comments and leave things down below, and I'd love to hear from you what you think is a great growth piece in the market, especially for someone like this. But it seeks the long-term appreciation and inflation protections designed for that potential 25 to 35-year retirement horizon. This is not a sleeve that's going to pay your bills today. This is going to pay your bills later on in life. So in the growth bucket, I say just split it right down the middle between the two. You got the large cap US, you got the Nasdaq 100, and it was the point that he brought up. He says, are you not just duplicating across the board? And I have to agree with him. Yes, there are going to be some duplications. It's not going to be as diversified as maybe you would like to see or your financial advisor says you need to have. I said, but you have two very, very strong, low cost, low carrying fees funds that have proven to do very, very well. In strong markets, rebalancing gains, you're going to rebalance this probably within 6 months to a year. You're going to be rebalancing your funds. In bad markets, you got time to grow and recover. So I still say this is an area that this thing should easily be up at least 3 percentage points, get this thing up to about 15%. So we're going to let it naturally grow and get to that number. But any new money should be poured into the growth bucket. Now, the overlap, this is what we talked about. The growth bucket overlap disclosure. QQQM and VUG both lean heavy into large cap growth stocks. The intentional tilt, its focused exposure, can support long-term growth goals. So it's not complete diversification. I said that earlier, and I still mean this. This is not complete diversification. And it's the old-fashioned the rings. You put the ring around, and what in the middle is what's the overlap gap. And I just think the overlap gap is small enough for this operation, but not big enough that's going to do any damage to it. But I did tell him, intentional tilt. This is not a complete diversification. We're going to probably want to add things to this down the road. This is not just a set it, forget it program. We're going to have to keep working on this one in their situation to keep developing. And I think this is the weakest part of their portfolio, is the growth bucket, that we need to put a lot of emphasis and future look at how you're going to continue this, adding more funds or adding different funds to the mix to get more diversified. Now the income bucket, the $380,000 core piece. Now, I used in this one here basically 5 different ETFs, and there's reasons for what I'm doing here. Is to help create that $3,500 retirement paycheck. It's like I need to make sure that they can get this money coming out. So if you take a look at $380,000, and I'm going to give a simple number, you times that by 10, that's it's basically going to give you $38,000 a year. We're looking for something a little bit higher than 10%. So these are the things that we're starting to look at, and we got to be careful with this one as we move through. So the first fund I did was TDAQ. Then we went to GPIQ, GPIX, TSPY, and IWMI. So break it down. We have the Nasdaq 100, and I'm using TDAQ as the core because of its higher yield, and so far some very, very good, strong performance numbers. GPIQ gives us a great support to both ends. It gives us great support to an income side. So it's really a satellite. But it also has a great, strong growth fund. So I think these two working together made a better picture than using something else. Same thing goes with the S&P 500. I went with the GPIX as the core and TSPY as the satellite. But we did use them equally because we're trying to get as much income across the board as we can. Now these numbers, I'll tell you, we adjusted them after the phone call and kind of follow up to it. They asked not to share that, so I just went with the original option that we did, showing you the 50-50 across the board, and actually equal across all 5. And then the small caps, which gave them the diversification, the Russell 2000 from NEOS. Now, right off the stat, I know people are going to ask, why wouldn't you make GIPQ as your core? Because we need the income. Well, then why wouldn't you put QQQY in there from NEOS? Because it's such a, it's an income piece that you talk about. And there's a reason for these things, and that is going to be ROC. We talked about this with healthcare coming down the road. If they're not going to make many changes to this portfolio, healthcare when you hit 65 is going to mean a lot of different things for them for income and so on. So it's a future thing planning that we did. So let's break down the Nasdaq 100 first. Now, these two funds, I really believe they're starting to work hand in hand across the board. Okay, Tap Alpha Innovation 100, the daily income ETF. Now, it's not daily income distributions, it's daily, that they're changing their strategy on a daily basis. It selects income while maintaining the capital appreciation potential and uses very short calls in the same day 0 DTE calls. While Goldman Sachs still uses that same NASDAQ 100, they use a dynamic managed call option, which I've covered this many a times, but it's basically what I call a 75-25 category. So 25% of the portfolio will be covered when the market is growing. And when we get into volatility, they'll change it to 75% to collect more income. So this is how they collect their income and growth back and forth virtually all the time. So we put the people to work that will do what we want to do, which is increase income and increase our growth package of the portfolio. Now, together, you can see the previous screen had numbers, but I did it this way. Yes, you can mathematically probably calculate this in, but roughly 40% of their income bucket is put into the NASDAQ 100 between these two particular funds. Now, the S&P 500 and the small caps, we'll break this down a little bit more for you. Same thing, same situation that we're using the Tap Alpha and the Goldman Sachs because of still use the dynamic call option and the S&P 500. TSPY uses that same type of short-term duration calls. So we kind of balance the two, just use the S&P 500 differently. Then we went to the NEOS Russell 2000 high income ETF. This one here alone, 14.38% distribution rate. Is very, very attractive. And like I told them, I said, this gives you that potential for more diversification across the board. So the critical number, I told you this before, we use the same math process every time. The critical number is 11.05%. This is what their required cash flow rate for income bucket alone. So remember, they're doing $42,000, right? That's their income that they need. You divide that by how much money you're investing, $380,000. That says we need to find an 11.05% average income. Not 8%, not 9%, it's 11.05. And that's what we need to generate each year if the income bucket must cover the full gap without selling shares or using anything else from the other buckets. Well, 11% is doable, but it's on the high side, I always tell her. I says, look, you guys got to understand this. You may have to control spending a little bit. You may have to cut things a little bit just to make things easier and comfortable. But I'm not worried because you have the foundation bucket that's going to protect you. You have the growth bucket that's going to grow to hopefully put more money into this to reduce that 11% down to maybe a 10 or a 9 down the road. Plus, we're going to have some growth in this thing as well. So yield is not total return. And I wanted to make sure they understood this because immediately he started jumping saying, well, I know this fund's making 17 and this one's making 9 and this one's 12 and 15. I said, first off, distribution rates can change. They're a mathematical number. If the price of the shares go up, the distribution yield goes down. If the price of the shares go down, the yield goes up. So what we want to look at is total return numbers, not just the yield numbers. This tells us what the fund is actually doing. The distribution rate is the cash paid to the investors. It may rise and fall over time. It can include return of capital. While total return, the price changes plus distribution. Okay, so it's using multiple pieces to tell you what's happening with the fund. It's also affected by the NAV movement, and it's reduced by expenses and taxes. So it's why I say it gives you the hardest core number that you can look at. So if you find something that is, tell me straight out, if you're looking at something that has a 20% total return, Then we can break down what the yield is, the growth is, and then we get a better picture of what's happening with the fund and can it distribute that 8, 10, 12, 14%. That's how we make sure we know our numbers are right. So how the bucket reacts with the fluctuations of markets and so on. The system absorbs monthly income variations instead of forcing panic selling. So your income bucket, it basically creates a paycheck. So example, let's say it produces $3,200. That would be a shortfall for them. The foundation bucket is going to make up that shortfall. The growth bucket can then refund the foundation bucket. You can rebalance when markets allow. So if you see things start to take off and grow and you need to rebuild your foundation bucket, you can always take and put money into there. Vice versa. If the income bucket one month had created a $4,000 income, you could take some of that money and put it back into the foundation fund. So the unique thing is everything is working together hand in hand, but managing and telling your money where to go, what to do, and how to make it work. So the goal is to avoid selling growth assets during bad markets. Okay, so many people make that mistake. So again, another chart I give you. If the fund comes into and produces $3,200 rather than the $3,500 you need, you have a $300 balance. You have a $300 that you owe. You take that money from your foundation fund, but later months, let's say it gets to $3,650. Well, there's $150 of your foundation recovered. You put that back in there, and you didn't sell a single thing. You didn't do anything. You just basically rebalanced your portfolio, and you rebalance the money coming from the income bucket, putting it back into the foundation bucket. It's not just free money that you're saying, oh, I got an extra $150 this month. No, you put it back into it to cover any shortfalls. This is what the luxury of this bucket system does and how it organizes everything across the board. So the Social Security bridge. Right now, 2 years pre-Social Security gap may require meaningful portfolio support. So as we said right now, the 2-year bridge that's needed, they need $84,000 to bridge that gap to get to 62, which is basically the $3,500 times 24, just to give you guys an idea. So eligibility, automatically claiming, I'm not telling them that's the perfect thing to do. They did it on their own. They felt that that's what they want to do. They want to do that, but they were planning on 62 right off the bat. But their kicker was that they gave this early retirement, which would give them health care for the next 5 years before they get onto Medicare. Claiming 62 may permanently reduce their benefits. And they were familiar with that, but they said if their portfolio would work, she could wait and he could claim, or she could claim and he could wait to make things work. The survivor benefits impact matters. We talked about that. I said, what if? We gave them a lot of different what ifs, and I do that just to get people to think. What if he passes away? What if she passes away? How is this all going to work delaying together? But after benefits begin, the monthly portfolio gap falls to $1,500 to $1,000 or less. So I said, right now at 62, you guys you're golden at 62 because you have Social Security, which is a leg of your income coming in that you can count on. Your portfolio doesn't need as much emphasis again, so you can rebalance your entire thing to fit your growth and your foundation and your income buckets to better. Not maximum numbers. So they understood that, being more understanding of exactly what this bridge is doing and what it's going to be. So the complete illustration allocation plan that I basically laid out to them again, I said, look, I'm going to go through this one more time with you so you guys can understand everything about it. We're going to protect today. You have a foundation fund that has cash and SGOV, and it's going to give you your job, your liquidity, and your protection so you can live. You can sleep at night. You're going to have a growth fund in these two select funds that you're going to be able to have an inflation defense. You're going to have some long-term appreciation. You're not going to use this for today's bills. You're going to use them for tomorrow's bills, down the road, growing and balancing your portfolio. And your income's going to cover you for the next 24-month gap. And then you're going to take your Social Security, and then this is going to totally change, and we're going to rebalance your entire portfolio across the board. So I have the protect today, build for tomorrow, and pay for today's bills. They liked what they saw. They said they agreed that, yep, they could technically recover. Okay, they could retire without much worry. They were happy about it. They liked it better than what their financial advisor said to them. And I don't argue with financial advisors. They have their way of doing it. I'm not a financial advisor. But overall, they were pleased and better, more understood exactly where they stood to make better decisions. So the 5 questions before retiring, I really did this to them. I says, yield alone is not a retirement plan. Can the portfolio still work if distributions decline? Okay. What happens if the stock market falls 20% in the first year of retirement? Can the household temporarily reduce spending during bad markets? When will each spouse claim Social Security, and how much will the benefits reduce the $3,500 gap? And what happens to the surviving spouse when one of the security checks eventually disappears? These are things I left them to go home with and to think about and talk about and make their decisions. You know, can the portfolio work if the distributions decline? It's tight. And I wanted them to know that. I said I wanted them to know that if the stock market drops in 20%, can they handle a year? Well, I already have the answer to them, and that is a yes. But I also wanted them to seriously look at and say, can they temporarily reduce spending in their household over the next 2 years? Maybe skip a vacation. Maybe, you're not going to drive as much if you're not working. You're not going to do different things. Maybe you'll find things around the house to do more. But then I talked to them about what the Social Security claims to make sure that they understand once they cut into that, that's going to help them dramatically. But what if down the road? So they took these back. These are questions that they really had to ask themselves.